Welcome. Let's begin with prayer. Lord, we thank you for the gift of sports and for the administrators, coaches, parents, and children involved in our schools and organizations. We express gratitude for each child and for their unique personalities, and we ask you to bless each of us in our role ministering to those we are called to serve. Pray that we may have the grace and wisdom we need to provide for each child, that through our teaching, they may be more fully able to reach their potential and maximize the gifts that you have given them. Help us to be positive and encouraging, that each child may find joy in the experience of sports and through it recognize the presence of God. Help us to work together as leaders, particularly coaches and parents, in order to always seek your will and to serve these young athletes in our schools and our organizations. Amen. My name is Peter Piscatello. I'm the manager of outreach and operations support for the Play Like a Champion Today educational series. We are a nonprofit engaged in coach and parent education at the youth and high school levels. During my own career, I've had the opportunity to work in a variety of schools and organizations, both Catholic and public, from the youth level up through college. At Play Like a Champion, we have the privilege of working with more than 230 partners nationwide, most of which are Catholic dioceses, schools, and organizations. So what is this session about? Over the next 30 minutes or so, we'll discuss a vital component of the youth and high school sports experience: the relationship between administrators or coaches and parents. Just as a child's Catholic education, we are reminded that parents are the primary educators of their children. So too is this the case in athletics. Parents provide invaluable support for helping a child to maximize the physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual gifts God has given them. Of course, school and league leaders provide a platform for the development of these gifts and talents, while coaches work closely with young athletes to hone skills and teach valuable lessons. We must always remember that the child is at the center of the youth sports experience. But the reality is that without each of these roles that adults play, a child would find it difficult to reach their potential and develop the lifelong skills that sports can offer. Yet too often in today's world, coaches and parents seem to operate less together and more on parallel paths, or worse, at odds. In this presentation, we'll address some of the key factors in providing children from 6 to 18 with the best possible sports experience. We'll consider causes for concern for coaches and parents today, and we'll unveil 10 ways that coaches can develop a partnership with parents as part of a great youth or high school sports experience. Throughout, we'll consider sports in the context of our Catholic mission, keeping in mind how this mission uniquely impacts our roles as administrators or coaches and informs the way we minister to our athletes. Though we would all prefer to be in an in-person session that allows us to engage our peers and be more interactive while discussing this topic, we'll make use of the virtual format to be as interactive as possible, posing questions for you to consider while sharing real-world examples and some media. You may want to grab a pen and some paper to write some thoughts down as I pose questions for you to consider in your own work. Let's get going. Let's begin by providing some context for our discussion. As we work with coaches, parents, and student athletes across the country, we like to begin each session by taking a moment to reflect. Before we talk about the experience of young athletes today, I'd ask you to take a moment to consider your own sports experience. I invite you to pause this video following each question to think about your answer and write it down. This exercise will help us as we consider our role in transforming the youth and high school sports experience today. When you think about your own youth sports experience, what do you remember? Pause and write this down. How did coaches and parents shape this experience? Was it positive? Getting closer to the present, what about your child's youth sports experience? What has your relationship been like with their coaches? If you've coached them, what has your relationship been like with the parents of kids on your team? If you don't have children, What's your perception of the relationship between coaches and parents in your school, organization, or even sports in general? Finally, I want you to consider this last question as we move through the presentation. Do Catholic sports programs provide a distinct experience for families? As administrators, coaches, and parents, are we fulfilling the same mission as our parishes and schools? Do sports mirror our Catholic faith, and does the experience lift up our children? We'll come back to those last questions a little later on. Whatever your answers to those questions, hopefully your experience with sports didn't look something like this. While that video may provide an extreme example, it illustrates the sort of issues we face in amateur sports today. But before we address those causes for concern and provide some solutions, it may be helpful to discuss our mission when it comes to Catholic youth and high school sports. Children ages 6 through 12 have been asked in several different studies, why do you play sports? The answers are always the same, and you can see several of the top answers here on the screen. But what do you think is the top reason, the number one reason given by kids for why they play sports? What do you think? It's to have fun. At the most fundamental level, sport is play. It is an activity designed to be fun. It includes important elements like physical activity and competition that contribute to this fun, but at its core, it's about enjoyment. What's particularly interesting in these studies of why kids play sports is that while they do love sports for a number of different reasons, they clearly understand the priority of having fun and other benefits. While they do note they want to win, it's important to understand that kids place that down the list, in this case, 7th or 8th, depending on gender. Kids do want to win, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they often give it a far less important place in sports than adults do. So how does this information inform our mission as Catholic schools and organizations? The Church has a rich, if usually unknown, theology of leisure and play. This dates back to the earliest days of the Church, as St. Paul uses sports as an example in his letter to the Corinthians. In the Middle Ages, St. Thomas Aquinas asked in his Summa Theologica, can there be a virtue about games? His unequivocal yes led Jesuits hundreds of years later to provide time for play and sport during the school day, something that still holds true in our schools today. Aquinas demonstrated that there is a virtue in balancing academic studies or work with activities that bring joy while allows both children and adults to more fully experience all the dimensions of God. Over the past century, nearly every pope has commented publicly on the importance of sport. With the recent St. John Paul II and Pope Francis, noted sports enthusiasts. You can see by the quote on the screen that Pope Francis has focused in particular on the importance of sport remaining play, calling into question trends that are detrimental to this understanding. To that end, in June 2018, the Vatican published their first ever formal document on sport, titled Giving the Best of Yourself, a document on the Christian perspective on sport and the human person. It's a terrific testimony to the impact of sports in today's world, outlining the ways the worldwide church should engage sport and encouraging each of us to respond in our own communities. You can easily find the document by searching online or through the Vatican's website. In 2020, NCEA published a book written by Play Like a Champion that provides an overview of the document and a call to action, along with a plethora of resources for administrators, coaches, and sports parents. You can find that by visiting the NCEA's online store and searching Play Like a Champion. Clearly, the Church has indicated that sports make up an important part of our mission as Catholic schools and youth-serving organizations. Recall the mission of your own school or organization. Take a moment to pause and look that up if you need a refresher. In nearly every school mission, there are clear areas where sports can play a pivotal role in realizing that mission. Review your school's mission through the lens of sports. Take it line by line and ask yourself how your athletic programs are working toward that same mission. In our role as administrators, coaches, and sports parents, this sort of evaluation is important. We know that parents are the primary educators of their children and that our schools play a critical role in supporting a child's academic and faith formation in our classrooms. In the same way, a view of sport through the lens of our mission in Catholic education sees administrators and coaches as supporting the formation of our children through sport. The classroom of a coach may look different, and often it has a unique focus on developing physical skills, but the core concepts and mission are often the same. Our goal is to serve our children, to lead them closer to God, and to help them to maximize the gifts and talents that God has given them. This approach will be illuminating as we shift now to consider the issues we face when working together and solutions to these issues. As many of the causes for concern in youth sports today have to do with the development of children, it may be helpful to say a very brief word on this topic. The three models listed here on the screen represent the evolution of a long-term athlete development over the past 25 years and are the most often used and cited in American sport. These are considered the model for developing elite athletes. A full treatment of these would require a separate session, but for our purposes, it's important to note that the core concepts are largely consistent throughout. Research has consistently found that the best way to develop young athletes is by allowing them to begin by playing a number of different sports, with the emphasis from programs and coaches simply on having fun and learning the game until at least 10 years old. The models vary slightly from 10 to 14, but largely continue to emphasize playing multiple sports while learning the value of training and actively developing core skills. It's only at about 14, often entering high school, that these models then suggest elite athletes may benefit from shifting to a more specialized approach to a chosen sport. From there, research shows the gap often widens between kids who may have more athletic talent and their natural development will allow them to grow and excel in unique ways. So why are these development models so important? Because when we look at some of the major concerns in youth sports today, many of them show a divergence of parents and coaches from both our mission as educators and the best practices for developing young athletes. In many cases, these issues have opened a chasm between coaches and parents who may have completely different sets of objectives when it comes to sport. If we believe that the best sports experience for kids involves coaches and parents working together, then this represents a problem. Listed here are some of the major concerns that have drawn the attention of concerned leaders, including the Vatican. I'll highlight just a few of these concerns. One I frequently hear from coaches when it comes to sports parents involves unrealistic or disordered expectations. Take a moment to think about the last time you experienced this. I'm guessing it won't take you very long. This can lead to excessive pressure on athletes and an overemphasis on winning. At the youngest levels of youth sport, the desire of parents to see their child succeed can create issues for coaches and hinder a child's enjoyment. Volunteer coaches can be pushed out and kids pushed to meet standards that might not be realistic even for an older athlete. At the high school level, administrators and coaches often face pressure to win or lose their jobs. Striving to win is important and laudable, but while it's certainly possible to both win and to do so within the context of a broader mission, in too many places today, expectations and incentives to win create separation between a school's mission and that of its athletic programs. This has a significant impact on coaches. Instead of appreciating the gifts of each athlete and allowing coaches to work toward maximizing their potential as individuals and team, the adults surrounding young athletes often set their own expectations that far exceed or differ from reality. Now, here's a humorous example that speaks to this larger issue.
Go get that donkey. Hey, you're going the wrong way. Come on. We got slaughtered at musical chairs. We practiced this at home a million times. We are losing. I can't believe I missed Pilates for this. Hitch your own ride home, Missy.
A related concern involves the expectation that young athletes will participate in high school or college sports, despite the long odds of either of those in some cases. Though most kids thankfully still have the opportunity to participate at some level of high school sports. At larger Catholic high schools, there may be upwards of 100 athletes trying out for a limited number of spots. In many cases, parents who had a great experience in high school have a well-intentioned desire to see their kids have the same opportunity. Another all too common trend is parents believing their child can get a college scholarship. In both cases, these dreams can lead to spending thousands of dollars on training and competition intended to put kids in position to excel. Unfortunately, it also leads to increased pressure on coaches, and it leads to too many kids deciding that sport is no longer fun and quitting altogether. According to research done by the Aspen Institute's Project Play, the average child spends just 3 years playing a sport and quits by the age of 11 because it's not fun anymore. Moreover, an estimated 70% of kids drop out of sports altogether by the age of 13. As I briefly mentioned earlier, St. Thomas Aquinas talked about the importance of play, but when he did so, he emphasized that leisure must be done for the enjoyment of the activity itself, not for some other end. By making sports a means to some greater end, we're missing the fundamental point and hurting our kids in the process. Finally, though most of us have not attended any sporting events in the past year, these statistics on the screen will probably still ring true. Some athletes, coaches, and officials have even admitted to enjoying the limited attendance still in place in many locations, as they report far less abuse. We all hope that family and friends will be able to once again gather for sports at all levels in the coming months. But when we do, these are issues that need to be addressed. Of course, our goal here is not simply to look at the issues, but to consider solutions. As administrators and coaches, it's clear that many of these issues arise when parents simply aren't on the same page we are, either in regards to our mission and goals in youth sports, or more specifically as it relates to development of a young athlete, or even appropriate behavior during competition. If we're going to address these issues and create the athletic experience our children deserve, we must work together. Just as it takes all parties working together in a classroom to fully serve the child, the same is true in sports. Let's take a look at a short video that will provide an overview of some solutions and feature comments from former high-level athletes who are now coaching. They'll help to show that in an ideal environment, parents are partners.
It is the responsibility of the coach to create a positive partnership with sport parents. Parents should be educated with Play Like a Champion's guidelines for sidelines, so they learn how to create a positive environment in sporting competitions. Coaches and parents are on the same team and should always treat each other with respect and dignity. Toxic sideline behaviors include coaching from the sidelines, cheering when the opponent makes a mistake, negatively reacting to an official's call, and taunting or making disparaging remarks. Positive sideline behaviors include making encouraging, positive statements rather than commands, cheering for good plays by both teams during the game, and treating the official with courtesy and respect.
It's also critically important for coaches to have good communication with families and parents, so parents understand and can have the proper expectations for their kids. Sometimes our expectations get skewed when we have tunnel vision on our own youth, our own child out there playing, and so to have good communication between parents and coaches certainly helps to set the right expectations and put the parents in a position to fully support their kids and not just worry about the end result as well.
I think any coach needs to spend some time, certainly early in a season, going over with their parents what their expectations are, what they can expect from the coach. And maybe even for me, I would go over what my coaching style is, the language that I use with my players, my kind of typical day approach to when your children come to the ice rink, what they should expect. And they should hold me to those standards. And but I think it's a day-to-day, I can help myself as a coach by communicating very frequently with my parents of my players.
For the remainder of our time here, let's expand on this idea of parents as partners and take a look at 10 best practices for working with sports parents. I'm often surprised how few administrators or coaches take these simple steps, which can have a great impact on the relationship between coaches and parents on a team. Perhaps you're already doing some of these things in your own program. If so, I invite you to consider how you can expand the practice to create an even better relationship. Taking these steps will help create an environment that is positive and supportive, allowing coaches the space to develop the young men and women entrusted to their care and giving athletes the experience they deserve at every level of sport. We talked earlier about the issues caused by unrealistic or disordered expectations. And one of the best ways to combat this issue is for coaches to set clear expectations themselves at the beginning of each season. Coaches should be encouraged to hold a meeting at the beginning of each season. If it's your first with a particular group of kids, this is an important opportunity to introduce yourself and set a standard. If you've coached the same group for several seasons, reminders about important topics are always helpful. Take the time to share your coaching philosophy and outline important information. Don't underestimate the need to clearly state things like practice and game schedules. Explain things like eligibility, codes of conduct, and team goals for the year. Be honest about what parents should expect in the coming season. At the youth level, this may also require providing general information about the sport for parents who have no experience. It should also include your playing time policy and how you'll decide who plays in what positions, or if those simply rotate at the youngest levels. At the high school level, you can expect that parents are more familiar with the sport, but you'll likely want to be more detailed about how you're planning to develop individual athletes and the team as a whole. Be clear and honest about all expectations for athletes and the program. Often, it is the difference in expectations that sets the stage for conflict between parents and coaches. We also encourage that you clearly communicate to parents when you are available and how to best reach you. If you can't answer calls during the workday or don't want your family's evening routine interrupted, make it clear. If you prefer phone calls to texts or email, let parents know. Communicate what topics are appropriate for parents to discuss with coaches and what topics are off limits. At younger levels, it's fair to expect parents to be more involved. But in high school, it would be far more appropriate for student athletes to discuss matters of playing time or position with the coach rather than the parent. Be clear about what you want from both parents and their kids, as this will create much better communication as you move into the season. Having considered this important first step to building a better partnership with parents, I invite you to take a moment to pause this video and write down 2 ways that you can better set expectations in your next season. It's also important that coaches solicit athlete input when it comes to developing a team's core values. These values, along with other rules and consequences, should be clear within a team and the athletes held accountable. But I would also encourage you to take this one step further and share these with parents. In addition to making parents aware of what's expected from all team members, parents can also be a tremendous help in supporting your team's values at home. If given the opportunity, parents will often hold their kids accountable, reminding them to make good decisions and helping to reinforce what you teach. Further, if parents understand the rules and consequences of breaking those rules, there will be no surprises later on. If an athlete misses practice and sits during the next game, or grades impact eligibility to play, parents will already understand what's happening. Again, this may not eliminate parents who simply don't agree with the rules or think their child's above them, but it can greatly alleviate issues. On a similar note, once in season, developing consistent methods for in-season communication can be key. Brief, regular email updates are often a really efficient way for coaches at all levels to provide information on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and assure parents feel included. You may have another way to handle this effectively. But once again, high school coaches will want to establish continuing communication that facilitates independent growth from athletes rather than relying on their parents to communicate. But at all levels, it can be really important to just simply communicate every so often and make sure parents feel like they're in the loop. In the heat of competition, sports can certainly lead to passionate opinions and strong feelings for everyone involved, coaches and parents alike. These two rules are simple but excellent ways to mitigate conflict and facilitate better communication between parties. Often, when given a day to cool down, a particular issue may seem far less important or infuriating. If the issue still does require discussion, doing so once athletes, coaches, and parents have had the opportunity to calm down and reflect will lead to much more positive and constructive conversations. For coaches, it's also never a good idea to raise your voice when speaking with parents. As frustrating as it can be when presented with an intense parent, sometimes it's best to simply let them vent. Your call may de-escalate the situation and result in a better conversation, but at the very least, you will maintain your integrity and improve your chances of having a better relationship with the parent moving forward. Moving to our next step, setting expectations and establishing good communication will allow you to create an environment where parents are partnering with coaches to support their child's sports experience. Keeping this going by facilitating a relationship where parents feel that they are working with coaches is very important. Remind them through the season that you value them and that their support is critical to the success of their child and the team as a whole. Encourage them to be their child's biggest fan and share with them if you have concerns about their athlete's behavior or performance. For coaches who have dealt with difficult or meddling parents before, this partnership mentality can be daunting. However, it makes for a far better experience. If parents do overstep boundaries, you can always adjust communication or pull back their involvement. As part of this mindset, it's important to give parents practical ways to invest in your team. Now, this could be as simple as post-game snacks for the youth soccer team or planning a postseason banquet in high school. Often, Catholic Youth League games require volunteers for each team to run the clock or keep a score sheet or even manage concessions. High schools may have the same needs, but may also have unique opportunities for parents to show their support. Whatever the method, find small jobs for parents and ways that they can be involved constructively. Delegating these tasks to parents can allow you to focus your coaching while fulfilling their desire to be a part of their kid's team. I would also encourage you to solicit input from parents when appropriate through the season. If there's a simple decision that can be made by parents, let them make it. A postseason evaluation may also be more helpful than you think. Seeing what parents think may sound terrifying to most coaches, but it can often be positive, enlightening, and help you to improve in certain areas. If appropriate, you can also create a more thorough evaluation that requires parents and athletes to reflect on the season and set goals for next year. Creating a simple online form is free, easy, and a great way to increase parent ownership while growing as a coach. As I've said before, when it comes to athlete development, it's important that coaches be honest, remain positive, and emphasize effort. Affirm the goals that a child or parent may have for their development, but don't encourage unrealistic ideas that hurt the athlete and your team. Honesty can take a positive approach by pointing out the things a child needs to work on in order to achieve their goals. Focusing on short-term rather than long-term goals may also be helpful in this regard. Praising effort instead of results is part of a growth mindset and a great motivational tool. Remind parents that your goal is to help the child use the gifts and talents that God has given them in order to reach their maximum potential. No child can do more than that. Earlier, I mentioned the increasing issue of parents having unrealistic expectations regarding college scholarships or even high school participation. The chart here on the screen is put out by the NCAA and paints a much different picture than what most of your parents would expect. For coaches dealing with parents in this situation, 2 points may be helpful here. First, for every sport, recognize that the vast majority of high school athletes who do go on to play in college do so at a lower level than Division I. In fact, most are at the non-scholarship Division III level. To this end, a second point. Most athletes who do participate in college don't get a scholarship to do so. Football and basketball are full scholarship sports that get most of the media attention, but nearly every other sport has limited scholarships that are split among a few athletes. Sharing this information with parents may be helpful. If you do so up front, it can be part of setting expectations that assures they're looking out for the best interests of their child and not looking too far down the road at dreams that may not be reality. On a practical level, encourage parents and athletes to focus on what they can control. Working hard to grow in skill during the current season is the best way to do that. While it's great to have dreams, focusing on being the best athlete a young athlete can be at each practice and each game will work out far better for everyone in the long run. Our last best practice was mentioned in the video I showed earlier. We've talked a lot about building relationships with parents, but simply assuring they engage in positive behavior at games is critically important. Here's a list of issues alongside positive behaviors that can and should be used. Consider using this list or creating your own and setting the expectation of positive behavior during your preseason meeting. Address situations as they arise and be consistent. Remember that surveys show that parent behavior absolutely affects their children. If coaches want athletes to be listening to their instruction and focused on the game in front of them, the last thing we need is parents yelling their own instructions or making a scene. Parent behavior has been shown not only to distract kids, but increase anxiety, decrease enjoyment, and lead athletes to quit altogether. With these 10 tips in mind, let's return to some of the initial questions we asked at the beginning of this session. I asked you to consider if Catholic's youth and high school sports programs are unique, and to ponder how the mission of your school or organization fits with your athletic program. I asked you throughout the presentation to consider how this informs your role as administrators and coaches, as well as your relationship with athletes and, critically, parents. Stop to consider once again these important questions. The specific answers to these questions will differ for each of you, but I would propose an overarching conclusion. In my experience, administrators and coaches of Catholic programs have a unique responsibility to promote a fuller understanding of sports in service to a mission beyond the field of play. We are called to develop not just athletes, but saints, young men and women who have a relationship with God and use the gifts that He has given them to better the world around them. It's our job to work together with parents to create an experience that is both fun and formation, that brings joy and builds virtue. In this presentation, we have briefly explored the Church's understanding of sport, considered some of the pressing issues when it comes to today's sports parents, and looked at 10 simple solutions for allowing coaches to work better with those parents. It's my sincere hope that each of you has taken something from our short time together that you can use. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to use the email address on the screen to contact me. Be assured of my prayers for you in your work as administrators, coaches, and leaders. I pray that God will continue to bless each of you and the families you serve. Thank you, and God bless.